This is a bombshell. It's a new book that is revealing how the Biden administration lied to the American people. That's the only way you can characterize it. They lied to us for years about his condition. And just how big of a role did the legacy media and the people in his circle play in covering it up? A pretty big one. In Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnas' book, Fight, we learned that Biden's aides needed to guide his every move. You all remember the Easter bunny guiding him. That was a staffer dressed up as a bunny. And they went as far as to put fluorescent tape on the stage floor so he knew exactly where to walk. Well, now there's another book, and it claims that staffers even considered getting him a wheelchair. Part of the book says, quote, Biden's physical deterioration had become so severe that there were internal discussions about putting the president in a wheelchair, but they couldn't do so until after the election. So politics over the health of the president. Wow. And according to the book, Biden's own doctor, Kevin O'Connor, was worried about him dying. Quote, long privately expressed concerns, Mr. O'Connor did, about the toll that the presidency was taking on Biden's health. O'Connor sometimes quipped that Biden's staff members were trying to kill him while he was trying to keep him alive. Maybe a little lighthearted, maybe not, but concerning nonetheless. One former Biden aide recounted just how deep the cover-up went, saying, quote, we attempted to shield him from his own staff so many people didn't realize the extent of the decline beginning in 2023. It was a disservice to the country and to the party for his family and advisors to allow him to run again. And former Harris campaign advisor David Plouffe with some colorful words. He said this, that Biden's exit was a bleeping nightmare. I'll leave that to your imagination. Going on the record to say Biden, quote, totally bleeped us. Well, I find that interesting, Molly, because I want to remind everyone what we were told from the White House podium. Roll it.
Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with it. We just got back from New Mexico. We just got back from California. That is not a question that we should be even asking. Just look at the work that he does. Look how he's delivering for the American public.
They were considering a wheelchair, Molly.
Well, I just love this claim that the Biden White House was conspiring to keep his condition secret from us. And so the media are now coming out with these stories saying that that's why they didn't cover what we all saw with our own eyes, where when we talked about it, we were mocked and made fun of for noticing what we saw here. Who were they conspiring with? None other than CNN and Jake Tapper, who would tell people when they would say, gosh, it seems like Biden's condition is really bad. I'm looking at this with my own eyes. And he would say, why are you mocking someone with a stutter? And so for this person to come out and now say he has explosive new details, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to find out that people were considering a wheelchair for President Biden. It was also something we could all see with our own eyes.
Yeah, we could see it with our own eyes, but we were told it was cheap fakes, Emily. You know, I will point out, and you're spot on with the Tapper criticism, Alex Thompson was one of the few reporters who was on this early on. In fact, he wrote about acuity all the way back in 2021. His first piece in Axios when he joined was on the mental acuity of the president. You had about one reporter and a few others, many here at Fox, but beyond Fox, maybe one, who was on this. And yet we all saw it happening before our eyes, and the staff is cocooning him in an elaborate lie.
Well, and I'm not going to participate in backpatting for those media representatives that, fine, if he did his job for 1 second. I saw at the White House Correspondents Association dinner where it was such a petri dish of self-congratulations for the tepid covering of it, and then now coming out with these for-profit books on things that not only we already knew, but that you're now profiting twice off of, because they profited the entire time with that collusion and the conspiracy, and they downright harmed reputations. And so often the denigration that occurred of people who dared to question acuity, including this network, and now they want trophies, they want book profits, and they want book signings. So to me, the horror of the wheelchair thing is that the size of the machine of the cover-up is never too large to be surprised by an additional detail, because we saw the decline, but we didn't quite realize the enormity of the cover-up, and it seems that there is no end to that. I just hope and cross my fingers for there to be some accountability rather than book sales.
You know, Kevin, another Kevin O'Connor, the president's doctor, was the one who said privately if the president had another fall, a wheelchair might be necessary. And I just think about those around the president, hearing that from the doctor and then just eschewing that and putting a different scenario forward to the American people for political optics?
I wonder if the law shouldn't be changed specifically to medical support of the President of the United States, that those doctors be allowed, because under the Hippocratic Oath, he can't discuss his patient. But it's the security of the nation at stake here. Although he may have felt that he couldn't do this, he should have come forward saying, listen, there are some real issues here. And I'm sorry, Mr. President, but I'm also an American. And I have to tell the people the truth about you. You're broken. And it happens to many, many people. And there is a cognitive decline that occurs. And it's my obligation, because of the special dispensation they would give the doctor, the president, knowing you're going into the office with your doctor having this right, to observe you cognitively every quarter and say he's still good or she's still good. But this was bad.
Kevin, I love that you mentioned laws. In order to change laws, you need to have legislative curiosity. And I've asked this is probably the 10th time I've asked this on air, and I'll continue to, where are the Republicans with the special committee like what Democrats did with January 6th for years? Where's the 2 years of investigating this so we can change the laws and make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, I mean, it's not too late. I think what stood out to me is the David Plouffe comment that Joe Biden effed them by not dropping out earlier. He did not. He did you a favor. The more people saw from Kamala Harris, the less they liked. That 107-day sprint was to her benefit and to the Democrats' benefit. He didn't F them by not dropping out earlier. He F'd them by picking Kamala Harris to be his VP, because the party of DEI, they were never going to get rid of the first female, the first black vice president. She was always going to be yours. So he actually did you a favor. Also, think about how bad of a candidate you have to be to have been in politics for almost 2 decades and to take 37 days to do your first sit-down interview, and for it only to be 18 minutes and to have Tim Walz by your side because you're so bad you can't do it alone, or to take something like 50 days to put up a policy section on your website. You've been in the game almost 2 decades. You should know what you believe. So I would just, quickly say that Joe Biden did them a favor by not dropping out earlier.
Yes, well, many Democrats do not feel likewise. In fact, they're considering Kamala Harris again for the second go-around.
Last week, Joe Biden crawled out of his basement for a little damage control. But he wandered onto The View and accidentally reminded everybody why he dropped out in the first place.
The projects, the benefits. How do you lead the world without having the best infrastructure in the world? How do you lead the world without having the best health care in the world?
Not only did Biden destroy his legacy by staying in the race, he ruined Kamala's too. So Democrats are leaking like crazy to Jake Tapper. Biden's determination to seek re-election was an abomination. He stole an election from the Democratic Party. He stole it from the American people. Harris's 107-day campaign against Donald Trump was an effing nightmare. And it's all Biden. He totally effed us. Schumer's fingerprints were all over the coup, but his lips are sealed.
I'm interested to know whether the man that you saw sitting there on that couch on that day, you were in there, you saw him up close and personal. Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal government at risk.
You're facing all of this because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
That's not it. Biden was in such bad shape, his handlers wanted to put him in a wheelchair. Joe Biden's physical deterioration was so severe in 23 and 24 that advisors privately discussed the possibility he'd need to use a wheelchair if he won re-election. One more fall, and Joe would have been asleep at the wheels.
So the White House physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, was telling White House aides that President Biden's deterioration of his spine, the degeneration, was so significant that if he fell one more time, that he might have to be in a wheelchair and serve in a wheelchair for his second term. But everybody pushed off the notion that he use a wheelchair until after the election.
Joe's spine wasn't just giving out. His memory was, too. During his debate prep, all he was doing was napping and asking for cough drops. And he couldn't remember the name of his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. He kept calling him Steve. And at that famous fundraiser where Barack had to push Joe off the stage, Biden didn't even recognize George Clooney. That's when Clooney knew he was shot. Anyone who doesn't recognize George is obviously not all there. But the cover-up was deep. Even though everybody was in on it, Tapper was like, I was duped. It's the White House's fault.
The bottom line is the White House was lying, not only to the press, not only to the public, but they were lying to members of their own cabinet. They were lying to White House staffers. They were lying to Democratic members of Congress, to donors about how bad things had gotten. And then after the election, we found out all of these things that when you looked at what was going on with President Biden at the time, it probably doesn't surprise you the extent to which he was deteriorating. But now we have anecdotes and facts about what was really going on behind the scenes with details that Democrats wouldn't share with us until after Election Day.
Jake's 50 and just found out politicians lie. Jake Tapper's getting paid to write what Fox was reporting 4 years ago. We didn't need sources. We had our own eyes and ears. What's Tapper's next book going to be? Biden's border crisis? If you had a time machine and went back a couple years and read Tapper's book right to his face, he'd probably cut you off and call you an imbecile.
What we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You are
to watch somebody on stage
It's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
If Biden had a decent debate, Tapper would have continued the cover-up and they would have thrown Joe in the wheelchair the day after the election and said, look, he's just like FDR. They both beat the Nazis in wheelchairs. Is Joe in a wheelchair now? They don't care. They never did. He was just a warm body to shove against the door so Trump couldn't get into the White House. They couldn't even be honest, because if they were, it would have helped Trump win. So they destroyed their careers and their party for power. And now they have none.